What's up, Buttercups? I was on live with Rory the Storm last night, and I wanted to elaborate on something I said during that live. Here's an illustration I came up with based on that conversation. So you have black people here on the bottom, and they're labeled as shiftless, lazy, and not worth anything if they're not entertaining the masses. Then in the brown boxes, which are slightly larger, are Hispanic people. And they're considered a little more, quote, respectable because they're labeled as hardworking, but they're not necessarily considered intelligent. Then in the yellow boxes, which are a little larger, are Asian people, and they're labeled as hardworking and intelligent. And that affords a certain level of privilege, but they are still considered other. In the box above Asian women, you have white women. And their box is a little larger still because even though they're not labeled as particularly intelligent or hardworking, they still have a certain level of privilege due to being white. The same goes for white men who have the largest box. They just have more privilege than white women. Now, the men and women of the different communities are encouraged to fight against each other. And the different racial and ethnic groups are also instigated to fight against each other. The division of these privileges causes several resentments. Black people resent Asian and Hispanic people for having privileges that they don't have. Meanwhile, Asian and Hispanic people have bought into black people being violent criminals or lazy and stupid. Meanwhile, white people are put in the position to say why the other ethnic groups should not have the same privileges as they do. And when white people say these things, the other groups say, you're oppressing us, white people. And white people say, well, how can we be oppressing you when we're poor too? But everybody we just talked about is poor, which ultimately means that none of these groups really have any power whatsoever. There's just a perception of power. Then you have the bourgeoisie, and they have some access to money, power, and resources. But they are basically puppets. These are your elected officials and people that you see in the public eye. They have been put in place to keep the poor in their place because the poor is doing the work that the bourgeoisie and the ultra-wealthy don't want to do. It behooves the bourgeoisie to keep the poor fighting each other because in France from 1789 to 1799, when the bourgeoisie did not do this, the bourgeoisie paid with their lives. And then you have the ultra-wealthy who have the bulk of money, power, and resources. They control pretty much everything. But this is a function of all the dysfunction that's created in the lower levels. And this is why when I see all of the fighting going on this app along the lines of race, gender, and political affiliation, I see a big orchestration.